الحمد لله رب العالمين والصلاة والسلام على خاتم الأنبياء والأشرف المرسلين وعلى آله وأصحابه أجمعين أما بعد. طيب inshallah, this will be the last session of the charts and summaries. Inshallah, after this, when we pick the dars back up, inshallah, we will be doing the actual matan of Nushatun Nadar. But this is a very important dars. Why? Because many people don't realize the differences between different da'if ahadith. Tayyib? Meaning, sometimes there is a hadith where the da'af is very light. For example, it's a mursal hadith of a senior tabi'i. One of the tabi'een, that was a very early tabi'i, who only studied from the Sahaba radiallahu anhu. Tayyib, that senior tabi'i, like Hassan al-Basri or Ata or Mujahid or one of those Sa'id ibn Musayyib and these who only studied from Sahaba or mostly only studied from Sahaba, they say, Qala Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam. Tayyib. Now when we know they're not from the Sahaba, there is a weakness, but it's a very light weakness, because if they only studied from Sahaba and they studied from the Sahaba like Ibn Abbas and Abu Huraira and other great Sahaba like Nafi' who studied from Ibn Umar, or Hamran who studied from Uthman radiallahu anhum, then we're not so worried about the weakness, because those Sahaba were all thiqa, tayyib, adilun. So that weak is not the same as a hadith that is narrated 700 years after Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam with no sanad. Sometimes you get a narration, it was not known in the ummah for 400 years. 400 years later somebody says, Qala Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam. Who are you? What are 400 years of generations? Right? Sometimes you get somebody who admits, who says, I did kadab ala nabi, I lied upon the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam, I fabricated. The person admits it. So now the scale of what is here and what is here is very different. And a lot of brothers don't understand this, a lot of sisters don't understand this, and it causes confusion. What does it cause? Sometimes somebody gets up and they mention a hadith in a khutbah or a dars that's a mawdu' hadith. It's a fabrication. We know this is not the words of Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam. Some of them, and we'll give examples later in the durus, the person comes out and says, I made it up. And somebody mentions that and you tell them, Akhi, you can't make kadab ala nabi. They say, brother, it's okay. You can use da'if hadith for fazail. No, you can't use mawdu' hadith for anything except warning people. So this is one extreme. The other extreme is, sometimes there is a mas'ala where there is no dalil. So now you have an issue where you need a hukam and there is no sahih hadith. So either you have your own, for example, deduction, or you have a mursal from a early tabi'i, and many ulama would accept that. Or for example, if you have a amal that is established through sahih ahadith, but then there is a mursal hadith about the fadail of that amal, many ulama would allow to use that, because that weakness is not such a serious weakness and it will not cause a bid'ah to come in the ummah. For example, if you bring me a hadith and the weakness is not kadab, it's not munkar, it's not extreme, it's not da'if jiddan, let's say it's mursal. Tayyib, a tabi'i says qala Rasulullah sallam, and it mentions the virtue of hajj. Tayyib. Now if somebody mentions this hadith about a virtue for hajj and the weakness is not bad, what will it do? It might encourage you to go for hajj. Tayyib, is going for hajj established or not? Yes or no? Tayyib. So you're not going to have kadab ala nabi, you're not going to lie on the Prophet, you're not going to make some bid'ah in the religion. You will encourage somebody to do something good. So if the weakness is light, many imma and ulama would allow that type of a da'if hadith to be used for fadail. I'm not getting into that issue here. I'm just explaining the different types of da'af and what comes out of it. On the other hand, if somebody comes with a mawdu' fabrication about some new ibadah, unlike hajj, a new ibadah that is not there in the religion. Now if you accept this fabrication, what do? You harm the religion. You bring bid'ah into the religion. You stand in front of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, and that will, the person of bid'ah, is not forgiven. There is many dalail we can explain inshallah. And the person of bid'ah doesn't even make istighfar, they think they're doing something good. Unlike the fasiq. So then you can corrupt the religion. Right? So there's a very big difference, and that's why you need to understand what gets graded. Tayyib. So we talked about two types of ta'an, and we began this in the last dars, and I told you guys that's just a muqaddama for this. In this dars we will cover this inshallah. So there is ta'an fi adala, or fi ta'an fi dabt. Tayyib. There is ta'an in the adal of a rawi. What does that mean? You can criticize the moral character of a rawi. Tayyib. Regularly, we shouldn't criticize people, right? Regularly, I shouldn't walk around and say, this brother is like this and this brother is like this. But the ulama of jarh wa ta'deel can. Why? Because they have a shari'i reason. For example, you should not backbite people. But as we know from the hadith of Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam, if somebody comes to ask for somebody's daughter's hand in marriage, and you know for sure something that is bad or wrong in that brother, or the other way around for a sister, then you're supposed to tell the person. That's not considered backbiting, because you're stopping the harm on an innocent person. In the same way, if you know somebody to be a kadhib or a kaddab, a liar or a continuous liar, then you cannot allow them to lie upon Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam. That's not backbiting, that's not exposing faults, that is a shari'i reason. So ulama of hadith, ulama of jarh and ta'deel, those earlier a'imma and ulama, understand this. No alim today, or in the last 100 years, or the last 200 years, or the last 300 years, can go and grade a rawi. This is a misunderstanding people have. Oh, how did Shaykh Albani make the hadith sahih after 1400 years, or make it da'if, or Ahmed Shakir, or Shaykh Arnoud? They didn't. What they did is they went back, may Allah be pleased with them and reward them. They went back and looked in the books of the earlier a'imma and ulama. Those earlier a'imma like Imam Ahmad and Yahya ibn Ma'in and Ali al-Madani and Ibn Khuzaymah, Ibn Hibban, all these earlier ulama, what they did, they went and met those rawis. They went and investigated about those rawis. Sometimes they sat with them, sometimes they spent months just to look at one narrator, and they recorded what was known about them. And those are in the kutub of rijal. In those big books like Imam al-Dhahabi and Imam Abdul Ghani al-Maqdisi and other a'imma and ulama, al-Mizzi and others, they wrote these huge works, al-Kamal fi Asma al-Rijal wa Tahdib al-Kamal, and other books like this, and al-Khulasa and others. They collected those biographies. So those ulama in our time, what can they do? They can go to those books. So they find a book like Targhib al-Tahdib, and they look at all these hadith and there's no grading. So they go back and they look up those books and look up each rawi, and they write about that rawi. And then they compile from the earlier ulama's work the grading of a hadith. Nobody can come up with a new jarh or ta'deel of a rawi today, of a rawi in hadith. So, in ta'an, when a ta'deel is to strengthen, is to praise, say this person is thiqa, this person is reliable, and there is usul for that. Not going into that today. Jarh, to criticize, or ta'an, to have that accusation against. So when you have ta'an fil adala, it is a ta'an in the moral character. Or there's ta'an fi dabt, or the precision of their reporting. So somebody could be a very pious person, but they always mix up words, and they always mix up wordings, and they always mix up ahadith, and they always get confused. So then we accept their religiousness, but we still can't accept hadith from them because of the fact that they would have a problem in reporting. And we'll discuss that inshallah. Tayyib. So let's begin. And I just chose 5 examples from each one, just as an example. I mean, there is many more we could cover inshallah ta'ala, and we will cover. In the first time we did the dars, Akhuna Shayba was there, and Dursa and Ammar and other brothers. We covered 50 such terms. But we're not doing that here, because this is the grading made easy class, right? Tayyib. So the first thing we can look at, and this is definitely the most serious, is kazab al-rawi, where a rawi, a narrator, lies. Tayyib, here that person will be known, if they lie, is a kadib. If they continuously lie, they will be called kadhab. Ism mubalagha, kadhab. Or dajjal. Many rawis are called dajjal. In the books of hadith, look at kana dajjal. Or they'll be called other very harsh terms. Now these terms are not taken lightly. When somebody uses this term for a rawi, it is either because they know for sure this person lied and continuously lied, or there were people that came out and admitted to it, or for some very harsh reasons. Now sometimes, ulama of hadith, there are three types, right? There are three major categories. There is the mutashaddidun, those that they were very strict. Then there is the mutasahhilun, I'm not going to give examples now. We'll get into that inshallah. Are those that were very easy in their grading. And there's mu'tadilun, those that were in the balance. And this is well known, and we've documented, and we know, and we studied this in Nukhbat al-Fikr, and inshallah we'll study it later in Nuzhat al-Nadar as well. So sometimes somebody may give a jarh on somebody, but then another alim in ilm al-rijal, not just anybody, can come back and say, no, this was not this person, or can explain that jarh. Tayyib, if you only have a jarh, and you only have ta'adil, and you have no explanation, what gives preference? Jarh. Because we're always careful. Tayyib? Now, if somebody gives ta'adil, somebody says this person was a great person, but then another alim says he seemed like a great person, but before he died, he came and he admitted that he used to drink, and he did this and this and this, and he lied, then he would go in these categories. When you have a rawi like this established, in some of the ahadith, asanid, you will find 2 or 3 of them. They're all kadhab, they're all liars who were known and established to lie. That type of hadith is called mawdu'. This is a fabrication. We cannot let people lie upon Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam, because that would corrupt the religion. Let me give you an example. How many of you know who King James is? The Sunday da'wah's got me messed up with this stuff. Right? So who knows who King James is? Who's King James? He is the one that sanctioned and authorized the compilation that is the base for all English language Bibles, which is called the King James Version. Most Bibles that you get today, if you open the front, you will find King James Version. But who was King James? That's one of the things he did, but who was? There is a biography, you can Google it. It's called King James, the Queen of England. And there was a reason why they called him the Queen of England, right? You can guess at why. And he was somebody who had inappropriate relationships with his mother, with others, men, and with animals. And this is historic facts. You can look it up. It's been documented in his biographies. Books were written. Not just that, he was well known to be a liar. And even when he was trying to get to the throne and the stuff he did, I've read his life, he was a very immoral person. So that type of a person we could never accept in narrating the Quran and explaining the Quran, or in hadith. Alhamdulillah, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala preserved our religion through these sciences. It is the blessing of Allah, but this is the sabab. So if you have a kadhab, that hadith cannot be used in fadail. It cannot be used in virtues. Another way, you can have a mawdu' hadith where there is no sanad for 200 years or 300. Like for example, in the book Fadail Amal, there is a hadith that some of the fuqaha later, hundreds of years later, mention in their books, and there is no sanad of it. Even the author himself says, this is not in any book of hadith, we cannot find any sanad of it. So now this is called mawdu', this is a fabrication. It's mu'allaqan sanadan, and it's mawdu'. So here, this is a very serious issue. And here, this type of a narration from a liar, from a non-existent chain, or somebody who admitted. Now many of these were people who lied. Some of them, like we read in their biographies, they were Yahud, they were Jews. And they pretended to be Muslim. And when they were caught, when the sword was put to their neck, that why were you trying to corrupt the religion? They would say, I fabricated 50,000 ahadith. But alhamdulillah, because the ulama of hadith, what they did, then they would go through every change and they would find him and who was around him and who supported him, and they would grade all of those to be mawdu'. Now if you have somebody like that, and this is the real example, right? People who admitted that they fabricated. They said, we lied. Until today, There are fuqaha using those narrations to support their madhab. There are people using those narrations to impress people in khutb. How can we know that somebody did this and accept that? Never. طيب. Next is tuhmatul kadhab. Tuhmatul kadhab, when somebody is accused of lying, but we cannot say 100%. طيب. Now, this is a very serious issue. If they're accused and cleared, then that's fine. Then they can be acceptable. They will not reach Sahih, and Sahih is very high level, but depending on the case and so on and so on. But if somebody lies in the marketplace and people who work with them said he lies, but then he says I don't, and some people are like, well, it doesn't really lie. So now it's not clear. Like kadhab here is clear. But if you have that type of a accusation, can we accept hadith from him? No. Unless there is clear, like somebody could make a false accusation and the ulama of jarh wa ta'dil would then go in and clear it up. If they were able to say, the only people that accused him were people that he did better than in business. Okay, fine. He can be a Hasan Rawi. Maybe he can even be a Sahih Rawi, depending. طيب? But if not, if there is a very strong case but not 100% proven, we cannot say that hadith is a lie. طيب? We cannot say it's a fabrication. But we say that hadith is matruk. It is rejected. طيب? Now think about this. Sometimes there will be a hadith that is reported by the best of narrators, the most thiqa, the athqal, the very, very strong reporter, huffaz, ulama, and there are 70 or 30 or 40 chains. And then somebody will come and get a matruk hadith against it. You can't do that. This is just foolishness. Any little child would know that. But there are ulama and fuqaha, because of that partisanship, they do that. But we need to learn, no. Matruk hadith is rejected, it's tark. This is very weak. You cannot use it for virtues. You cannot use it for fada'il. Right? Because there's a possibility that this is a lie. And we cannot take that chance with Rasulullah sallallahu alayhi wasallam. Then you get into the issue of bid'ah. Al-bid'ah. What is bid'ah? Innovation in the religion. طيب. Bid'ah is of two types. The one that makes the person kafir. Mukaffir, that by which a person becomes kafir. Or mufassiq, or that makes a person fasiq. What does that mean? Let's say somebody does a bid'ah in the religion and they say you can wear crosses. Right? You think this is far? It's not far. It's coming. You already got people dressing up like Santa Claus and sending all that kind of stuff. It's not far, right? They can say, well, the cross, it represents Isa alayhi salam, and we love Isa alayhi salam, and if you wear a cross and you kiss a cross and you make sujood to it, you're only showing ihtiram to Isa alayhi salam, and it's okay. Na'udhu billah min hadha al-kalam. May Allah protect us from this type of talk, but it's coming. So be ready, right? So here, what happens is, this makes a person kafir. He's making sujood to other than Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. This is ibadah in our ummah, not allowed to other than Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Somebody has bid'ah in their aqidah, and what do? They go make sujood to qubur, and they say, you need to ask this person in the qabr, and this person in the qabr can grant your dua. Not talking about tawassul, but talking about asking the person themselves. This kind of bid'ah makes a person kafir. According to Jamhur al-Ulama, this type of hadith is totally rejected. But then there is bid'ah that makes a person fasiq. What if somebody does some weird dhikr, like them they're not in the sunnah and they establish it as a practice kind of a thing? Here, most of those hadith will be made da'if as well, but sometimes it can be acceptable. And let me explain how. Let's say somebody is a very sincere person. He's mukhlis, but he's jahil. And we see this in ummah all the time. Somebody is raised in an area with a lot of bid'ah, and he doesn't know. So he just goes with the practice. You'll be raised somewhere, and on the 10th of Muharram, everybody's cooking, and there is people going out in the street, and they get used to these kinds of things. But they don't realize what they're doing, they have good ikhlas, and they don't do like shirk with it. Like many of the Ahl Sunnah wal Jama'ah, unfortunately in Pakistan and India and these countries, they give out certain types of food on the 10th of Muharram and things. You tell them this is all bid'at, and they're like, everybody's done it. Halim, what's wrong with Halim? Nothing wrong with Halim, but why the 10th of Muharram, right? So here, if it makes them fasiq, and they mention a hadith that the rest are all thiqah regarding the fadail of salah, well, we can accept that, especially if they're supporting evidences. Why? Because they have good dabt. The rest of their things, they're good. They make salah in jama'ah, they do everything good, they don't do kufr. Maybe they have one bid'ah, but this hadith is not related to that bid'ah. But now, if they bring a hadith about the virtue of giving out halim on the 10th of Muharram, that will not be accepted. So if a person of bid'ah, mufassiqah, comes with a hadith regarding the bid'ah that they do, totally reject it. If it's not, then it depends. It could be accepted, it could be rejected. Tayyib? So not all bid'ah is the same. Tayyib. Then there is the very important topic of jahala. Majhul rawi. What does it mean, majhul? Unknown. What does that mean? We don't know who he is? No. That's not what it means. Huh? Excellent. We don't know his hal. Tayyib. Under that we have three types. One is mubham. Tayyib. If somebody made tawdih, somebody made clarification about the rawi, he's no longer majhul. Like maybe somebody asks me, what do you think about some shaykh? And I told him, Wallahi, I don't know. I don't know. Right? I don't know. If I don't know, I don't know. But then somebody else can come and say, you know what, I studied with him, I saw him, he was a very good guy. Khalas, he's no longer majhul. At first, he was majhul, la adri, wallahu alam. But somebody else came and said, I know him, I stayed with him, I traveled with him, he's good. Okay, jahala is finished. And that happens a lot. A rawi, they will say he's majhul, but then somebody else, some other alim of jarh wa ta'dil will say, no, I went to his town, I saw him, I stayed with him for 3 days, I saw his business, I saw how he was honest, he's good. Or the other way, comes back and says, no, I know him and he's a liar, and he's a thief, and he's an alcoholic, and he's a zani. Happens, right? So that gets cleared up. Any one of these three, if somebody can bring forward a biography of them, an understanding of them, there's no longer majhul. But what if there is not such an effort done? A name comes in hadith and you look through the kutub of ilm al-rijal and you have the name. They don't think we don't know who he is at all. Maybe you even have a location. Maybe you even have some information. But how was their dabt? How was their adl? We don't know. So that comes to be majhul. Abu Hanifa and some of the A'imma and Ulema, they took these rawat to be authentic. Because they said that here we have to accept a Muslim to be good. And if we don't know anything bad about him, he's good. But the Jamhur al-Ulema, vast majority, they said no. Because even Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, when He talks about people bringing witnesses, He said, adilun, like people of adal. Yani those that have to be established to be good character. So that means, even though we think good about a Muslim, but if a Muslim narrates a hadith, now we have to make sure they have adl to accept that shahada. For example, if you go to a court in a Muslim country, we assume good about every Muslim. But when you go to a court, they will question you. They will have to establish your adl and your fairness and your good moral character before they accept your testimony. So that means that this is a mistake. If somebody is mubham, they are da'if, they are weak, until they can be proven. Then there is majhul al-hal and majhul al-ain. Majhul al-ain is somebody we know their name. They're not mubham completely, but they have only been reported through one chain. One narrator or one chain or one tilmeez reports through him, and we don't know about his hal. We don't know. So this is a pretty weak hadith too, majhul al-ain. Mubham is going to be the weakest here, depending. Sometimes mubham has many narrators, then it will be less weak. So that's going to depend. But in taking in consideration, then majhul al-ayn will be the weakest. So why? Because we don't have an explanation about the person and only comes through one sanad or one rawi. Only one person somewhere said, I heard this hadith from this person. Who is this person? We don't really know. We may have some information. I'm not saying that we totally don't know who they are, but we don't have enough to establish their adl or dabt. Then you have majhul al-hal. Majhul al-hal is somebody who reports through 2, 3, 4 and more narrations. Many people have reported through this person, but again, we don't know their exact state. We don't know their dabt, we don't know their adala, so again it's weak. So under regular circumstances, and I'm trying to not go into advanced issues, under regular circumstances, majhul al-ayn will be the weakest, majhul al-hal will be a little bit better, and mubham will be better than that, depending, but they're all weak. It's very understand to understand the difference in majhul al-ayn, majhul al-hal. Many tulab ilm don't understand this. And there is other depth and explanation that we covered in Nukhba that we're not covering right now, that we will cover later inshallah. Then there is fisq, somebody who is a fasiq. Depending on his fisq will depend on the weakness, but usually that will go da'if jiddan, a very weak. If somebody is an alcoholic, how are we going to accept hadith from an alcoholic? Right? This becomes a very weak hadith. And da'if jiddan and things cannot be used for fada'il. Right? This is why you need to understand, you can't just be like, brother, it's okay, it's fada'il book. You're relying on Rasulullah sallallahu for fada'il? No. Tayyib. So this was 5 tayyib types of jarh or ta'an on rawi because of what? Adala, their moral character. Then I'm going to mention 5 types of jarh or ta'an upon a rawi for dabt. What's dabt? It is their precision in reporting. And there's 2 types of dabt. One is with hifz, he would memorize really well, or one is through writing, kitaba. Some people, maybe they couldn't memorize, but they would take really good notes. And those are also acceptable. Maybe somebody doesn't have a great memory for memorizing, but their notes are excellent, and they report from the notes, we're good. As long as there's precision there. Tayyib. Here you have fahsh al-ghalat or kathratul ghafla. These are, and again, the somewhat, I'm giving some examples that show a great weakness. I'm not going to the very light weaknesses, but this is where somebody has many mistakes, or they are extremely ghafil, heedless in their reporting. For example, somebody comes and says, I'm giving you an example so you can understand. Anybody know of the team called Manchester United? Right? And City, those are from where? Good. Some brother comes in, man, you heard about that team from London called Manchester United? You're like, brother, it's in the name. It's Manchester United. No, they're from London, I know. You sure about that, bro? Yeah. You heard about the LA, I was going to say LA Chargers, but they are LA Chargers. The LA Buffaloes. And you're like, no, they're from, or what's the team from Buffalo? Bills, Buffalo Bills, right? So the LA Bills. And you're like, no, I think they're from Buffalo. And he's like, no, they're from LA. Like, I just Googled it, bro, here. No, they're from LA. Tell you? And I've known brothers like this. And I'm sure you've met brothers like this, right? And they insist on their being what they're wrong upon, right? I'm talking about brothers. So those types of people would be weak or munkar, depending. If they made mistakes occasionally, then they would be da'if. But if they continuously made mistake all the time and it was really established, then it can be munkar as well. Tayyib? Now you have, these are 2 categories. One is somebody who makes mistakes, somebody who's heedless. What's the difference? The person who makes mistakes is trying, and one person is he's just nonchalant about it. he's ghafil about it, right? He could go back and read his notes, but he's like, nah, I'm good. I know what it is. I already know everything. Right? And then they're repeatedly wrong. Right? So these kinds of weaknesses, narrators are considered either da'if or munkar depending. Then you have su al-hifd. And then you have mukhtalit, or they could be da'if as well, somebody who has a weak memory. And that also has a spectrum. How weak is his memory, right? But if somebody has a weak memory, and we know them to have a weak memory, and they are not supported by writing. If they're supported by writing, we accept them. But if they're not supported by writing, and they have a weak memory, then they cannot be accepted. Okay? Many of the people that started to study later in their life, even though they became great ulama and fuqaha, but when they would report hadith, they would make a lot of mistakes. Because hadith were memorized usually, illa mashallah, at a young age. Some of the a'immah and ulama, they memorized even when they were 80. They were 80, they were memorizing a hadith, and there is examples of that. But usually, so then what happens, a lot of these people, they were good people, but they were weak narrators in hadith. Tayyib? Other is kathratul awham or waham. Some people, they have waham. You know waham? Like, I guess you could say they imagine things that are not there, or they always have some weird ideas. Sometimes you see it in the masjid, like somebody, every salah they're going and making wudu. And you're like, brother, what happened? You left salah? Every salah? No, I wasn't sure. I felt something. You got like a physical issue? No, And then those kinds of people you'll see, like I know a brother, we came to the masjid, there was iqamah going on, he went to go make wudu. The salah finished in jama'ah, he was still making wudu. What are you doing? I think I missed a spot. Man, you took ghusl. Salah, 4 rak'ah, long salah finished, you're still making wudu. People have waham. Right? Like that, some people have weird ideas sometimes. They have this, I was up last night and I figured something out. What? There's aliens and they're here and they're doing this. Okay, where did you figure this out from? I watched a movie. Was it a fiction movie? Yeah. All right, bro. Jazakallah khair. Not learning hadith from you, right? So that kind of things happen. Some people have waham, right? And when that's proven, then this becomes mu'allal, or there is ilal. There is a defect in that hadith. Then there is mukhalifatul thiqa. When somebody goes against the more reliable narrators. Tayyib? For example, we're doing the dars today. Tayyib? There is 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14, 15, 16, 17, 18, 19, maybe about 20 brothers here, and I don't know how many sisters, right? So now, after the dars, brothers go out, they hang out at a halal cafe place, and they start talking, and one goes, we're discussing this mukhalif and this, and one brother goes, we were discussing fiqh. And everybody else is like, brother, were you asleep? And it was a hadith dars. And the brother's like, nope, it was a fiqh dars. Right? So now that person is mukhalif to the thiqa. He is going against those that are the regular students, the more educated students, and the big number, all of that. Right? So now that can be of two categories, and we discussed this already. Tayyib, if that person is a good person, he's a strong memory, he's not a da'if narrator, but he goes khalif to those that are awthaq, those that are stronger, ahfad, and those that are better memorizers than all of that, then we don't call it munkar, but we call it shadh. We say this person made a mistake, this is irregular. Okay? We don't say it was a fiqh dars based on one strong narrator if it's khalif to those that are stronger and more. Okay? But if he's weak in himself, he's a weak narrator and now he goes against strong narrators, then we call that hadith munkar. And we call what is preserved in both cases, what is preserved is called mahfud. So now you have another type of weakness where somebody always goes against those that are stronger in ilm than them, and these are mukhalifat thiqat. So in that case it can be shadh or munkar. All of these are da'if. All the red that we have here, all of these final categories are weak. But their weaknesses different from each other. And inshallah this will end the dars today. Jazakumullahu khair. Any questions?